Welcome back. Today I want to talk about what students actually need from adults. And I'm going to simplify this for us. There are probably 1,000 debates about education involving everything from curriculum and testing to technology and politics. But after 20 years in the classroom, from Washington, D.C. to London, England, I can tell you something that is very simple to understand. Students need five things from adults. It's not their ideology, and they don't need them to be perfect. They just need five things. So let's go ahead and get started. Number one, students need consistency. Let's face it, students watch adults constantly, whether it's in class or at home, online, watching movies or TV, whatever. They notice tone shifts and mood swings. They'll tell you when the rules have changed, and they can feel when the energy in the room changes. If the expectations that you have of that student move on a day to day basis, the students don't feel safe. In a classroom where the teacher remains calm and on track and works in the same general pattern every day, typically there are very few behavior problems. As an example, if we look inside a home of an alcoholic, bear in mind, this is an extreme example, but the kids in that home, they never know which version of their parent is going to come through that door. And it affects them mentally and emotionally because they feel like the ground is always shifting underneath. They don't know how to react. Consistency, on the other hand, builds a sense of psychological safety, and it allows their brain to learn content without having to worry about how to react or which person they're going to be talking to. When the nervous system isn't constantly scanning for instability, it can actually focus on the lessons that they were meant to learn. When I was back in the military, inconsistency under stressful situations created chaos among the troops, and it hurt our military readiness and reaction time to incoming information. In a classroom, inconsistency creates anxiety. I've learned that you don't have to be loud. In fact, you don't even have to be charismatic, but being predictable is a huge relief for many students. On to number two, there have to be boundaries. This one makes some people uncomfortable, but it's true. Students need boundaries. We need them to be clear about where the line is. It's not unkind to set these up or to tell them where the boundary is. In fact, it would be a disservice to not have the boundary. That said, those boundaries must also be enforced. When adults blur boundaries, students feel like they need to test them to see if they're still there. Not because they're bad students, but because they're developing. The prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for impulse control and long term planning, isn't fully developed in teenagers. Boundaries act as external structures, while their internal structure is still forming. In military leadership, as well as in education, and really most other careers for that matter, if the boundaries are left unclear, it creates confusion. In a classroom, we see what's called behavioral drift. So if a teacher says students are not allowed to talk during the lesson, and then the next allows it to happen, or at the very least, doesn't say anything when kids are talking during the lesson, then the kids never know where the line is for what's acceptable in that room. Hence, they're forced to guess and check where the boundary is each day. Boundaries are not about control, they're for scaffolding to success. If we are being completely honest, kids enjoy having boundaries. That's the reason why so many of them play games. And I don't mean just video games, but sports games as well. Kids want a framework and rules in which to play by, and that way they can judge that they're successful. Having boundaries and enforcing them allows them to operate within the rules and to succeed while knowing that everyone is getting a fair shake. Eventually, that scaffolding can come down, but only if it's no longer needed. Until then, make sure that they're aware of the boundary and the boundary is enforced. Number three, adults need to stay calm. This might be one of the most important rules. When students escalate emotionally, it's the adults who sets the temperature. If you go in there and match their intensity, then what you really do is double it in that small confined space. On the other hand, if you lower your emotional output, then you turn that room into a calmer atmosphere. Essentially, you regulate the emotional atmosphere. In high stress environments, whether military or classroom, I've watched panic spread from person to person like a contagious virus. That said, calmness can spread too. Students are capable of borrowing our nervous system in a way. If the adult is steady, then they can settle as well. If the adult is reactive, then they amplify because they don't feel like they're being heard. Calm portrays leadership. It's not softness, it's control of yourself. You are capable of teaching them how to master their own emotions, but only if you model it yourself. Adults need to listen. That's number four. Adults need to listen. Students know when they're being managed. They often have 13 to 18 years of experience by the time they reach high school of being managed. So most of them have also learned that they have siblings who get managed as well. So the parents, the teachers, they're tired of it. The thing is, they also know when they're being heard. Now, let me clarify one point. Listening does not mean that you automatically agree with them. It means that you hear their side and you make an effort to understand it. When a student says, "This is overwhelming," sometimes what they need isn't an excuse. They just need acknowledgement. When people feel heard, then their defenses drop. Better yet, their cognitive flexibility increases. That's psychology. Having been in military situations as well as school hallways where fights were ready to break out at any minute, I can tell you that listening lowers a person's threat response. When we help them lower their threat response, then they can begin to learn. If they feel threatened, then they're just reacting. They're not learning. We don't have to solve every problem for them, but we do need to take a moment and hear it. Okay, last one, number five, accountability. This is where balance matters. When it is true that students need grace, we also need to have consequences. Accountability is what builds competence. If there's no consequences, then there's no structure. So, having due dates on assignments and punishments for bad behavior established actually help them to know the outcomes for their actions and choices. If, however, the consequences are unpredictable or worse, humiliating, then there can be no trust between the student and the teacher, or even in later life, between the boss and the employee. The goal here isn't to punish, it's to inform and understand the acceptance of ownership for the choices that they make. In the classroom, and even later in your job as an adult, accountability should never be personal. It's meant to be structural. You learn to meet the standard because the standard itself matters. Classrooms aren't combat zones, but leadership and principles carry over to careers like the military and everyday civilian jobs as well. Adults need to have clear expectations and give clear feedback. Adults need to provide opportunity to improve and follow through on the results. That's how growth happens. What students don't need? Well, there's a lot. Students don't need adults arguing about them. They don't need outsourcing parents to teachers. They don't need outsourcing discipline to administrators. They don't need volatility. They don't need sarcasm disguised as wisdom. They just need you to be steady. Let me give you a leadership parallel here. Something I learned early on. Under stress, people look to the person in charge, not for their perfection, but for their stability. Teenagers are no different. If adults fear chaotic, then students feel unsafe. Okay? So if adults feel grounded, then students feel anchored. Leadership under stress isn't about dominance, it's about emotional regulation. That applies in the classroom, at home, everywhere. Now, the reality of this situation, students are navigating constant comparison, academic pressure, digital exposure, and global instability. They don't need us to rescue them from all of the discomfort, but they do need us to model how to move through it. Consistency, boundaries, calmness, listening, and accountability. 5 simple things. Notice I did not say they were easy, but it is simple. If we want resilient adults, we need regulated adults to guide them. If we want focused students, we need structured environments. If we want strong kids, we need steady leadership. It's not political, it's human development. Next time we talk, I want to get into politics a little bit in the classroom. What's real, what's imagined, and what's actually happening. Until then, before asking what's wrong with students, try asking what are we modeling? Because they're watching and they're learning from us. Welcome to the conversation.